A quest for Elden Ring's Vike, the character who appears on the cover art, was apparently cut from the game. You'll probably recognize Vike as the kneeling knight on Elden Ring's front cover. He appears only briefly in the final game as an NPC invader and boss who rewards you with his unique armor set and spear for defeating him. But it seems a bit odd that a character with such a small role would appear so prominently on the cover art. Well, that's because he was originally a much bigger deal, with in-game lore explaining that no other Tarnished was closer to the throne of the Elden Ring than Vike. Elden Ring data miners have since uncovered a cut quest line featuring Vike using some unused voice line, making reference to a knight in armor melting inwards. Unfortunately, no text or dialogue for Vike has actually been discovered, but the quest seemingly would have had a few dialogue choices and offered a handful of rewards, ultimately unlocking Vike as a summon in Stormveil Castle to help you fight against one of its bosses. It does seem really strange that such a prominent character with so much work put into it was cut, so here's hoping that future DLCs fill in some of the gaps. An Elden Ring modder has discovered a tragically forgotten NPC who's doomed to never fulfill their purpose due to an unfortunate typo. During the final phase of the boss fight in Raya Lucaria against Renala, you will have to deal with a room full of sweetings, young scholars who crawl around and harass you as you fight the Queen of the Full Moon herself. Several times throughout the fight, Renala will call on 3 of these sweetings to form a bubble shield around her. The chosen sweetings could be any 3 in the room, except for one lonely soul in the back corner. A modder has discovered sweeting number 21 as the ID number of 140000830 in the game files, but a typo causes Renala to call out for ID number 140008230, meaning that this particular NPC is never called and simply crawls around otherwise forgotten. So next time you're running through Raya Lucaria, pour one out for this NPC, doomed to never reach their true potential due to a mispressed number 2 key.
I am Melania.
Hard to believe, I know, but data miners have discovered that Elden Ring's most notorious boss, Melania, used to be even more difficult to beat than she already is. By analysing and playing through the 1.0 version of Elden Ring, that is, a version that's been untouched by patches or changes since the original game, a modder discovered several key differences with her attack pattern and abilities, making her significantly more aggressive. The most notable change is that version 1.0 Melania uses her old waterfowl move that wasn't originally tied to any health loss, and a similar but different attack called Melania Blade, which could be chained, all the while attacking more aggressively and blocking more overall. That alone sounds hellish, but the data miner goes on to detail other variations which include slightly different combos and increased use of the dreaded Scarlet Anea incantation. A pre-release build of Elden Ring has a quest that lets you craft a dream brew that makes NPCs chatty and sleepy. Essentially, it gets them drunk. Prolific modder Lance McDonald released a video where they explore an earlier Elden Ring build that included content which was ultimately cut from the game and was able to uncover a whole quest line, NPC, and other items which never made it into the final build. The quest involves a fully animated and voiced NPC named Jiko who's looking for ingredients to make his dream brew, which he explicitly says is a type of alcohol. Jiko says the dream brew will convince other NPCs to tell you their deepest, darkest secrets. If you agree to help him, Jiko gives you an item called St. Trina's Crystal Ball, which you use to collect dense fog of sleep from napping creatures. Bring the filled vial back to Jiko and he uses it to make his brew, which you can offer to NPCs to open up additional lines of dialogue and hidden lore. McDonald brings the dream brew to Merchant Carlet at his shop inside Church of Ele in Limgrave, and after Carlet drinks the brew, he falls asleep and has a nightmare about eyes being burned by a frenzied flame. Jiko then asks for 2 more vials of Dream Mist to make more Dream Brew, and it's then that McDonald discovers additional sleeping creatures, suggesting that this questline was pretty well formed before it was cut. Sure makes you wonder what other stuff was snipped from the final launch version, and if any of it is as fun sounding as getting NPCs drunk.
Alas, I am returned.
When it comes to cut content in Elden Ring, there's one character whose dialogue in particular makes for an interesting dive into the game's lore: Godfrey.
To be granted audience once more.
YouTuber SekiroDoobie discovered a selection of cut lines from Godfrey, and there are some interesting theories about what these new discoveries all mean. The dialogue seems to reinforce the idea that when it comes to the Elden Ring shattering, Marika may have originally had a plan in advance to shatter the ring, which Godfrey knew about all along. If Godfrey was aware that the Elden Ring would be shattered, then the banishing of the Tarnished was actually a plan to remove them from the Fingers/Greater Will's influence. The consensus seems to be that Godfrey was initially meant to play an even larger role throughout Elden Ring, with a potential storyline that would take place in the past based on the lines heard in SekiroDoobie's video. There's nothing concrete here, of course, just guesswork reading between the lines, but there is a lot to theorize about, with some juicy tidbits nestled with Godfrey's lost dialogue. One of Elden Ring's earliest merchants was originally part of a long-running, tragic questline before From Software scrapped it. Carlet is the first merchant you stumble across in your adventures in the lands between. Remember an NPC dressed like Santa Claus? That's our guy. Aside from selling valuable items and offering some lore tidbits in exchange for chatter, you don't really get much else from Carlet, as he remains rooted to the spot. However, the merchant was once tied to a tragic subplot of the game. Speaking to him further would have led to a mention of the Great Caravan, which was once home to merchants like Carlet and something he yearns to find. Defeating Godric at Stormvale Castle would send Carlet on a quest to find the Great Caravan, with certain clues left behind to help you find the merchant's new location each time he moved. This would have continued until you reach the subterranean shunning grounds beneath Lendl. This place is eerie enough and is home to the Three Fingers, which relates to one of Elden Ring's bad endings, but it's also littered with bodies. Some current in-game lore explains the bodies are all that remains of the merchant caravan after it was accused of heresy and burned alive, summoning the flames of frenzy and despair. In Carlet's scrapped quest, he discovers the fate of his people and embraces the flames himself. A look back at the Elden Ring network test highlights some significant changes to the finished game. In November 2021, Bandai Namco held a network test for Elden Ring, allowing players an early glimpse of the lands between to test the game's online servers ahead of its full release. Things obviously changed in the final release, and fans noticed all sorts of little differences. One of the more unusual changes happened to White-Faced Var, one of the early NPCs you encounter near the First Step Site of Grace. While he's largely here to offer some guidance for the newly tarnished, he used to be a lot meaner. In the final game, he mentions maidens and the Round Table Hold before telling you you're fated to die in obscurity. However, in the original network test version, he tells you that you're plumb out of luck and describes you as a bit player, before telling you, feel free to go off and die in a ditch somewhere. Charming. An Elden Ring fan has discovered that most of the game's song lyrics are just computer-generated nonsense. One of the aspects that makes Elden Ring so captivating is its music, which is chock full of haunting choral melodies. Intrigued by the meaning behind these songs, one Elden Ring fan dug a little deeper and found that although the lyrics may sound like Latin, most are actually just gibberish. Reddit user Magister Organi, a Latin student, has been studying the game's lyrics. They started with a Song of Lament, a beautiful piece sung by the game's siren-like creatures. According to their post on the PS5 subreddit, these lyrics are actually in Latin, but they were written by a lyricist who worked on just that one song. Curious about Elden Ring's other songs, Magister Organi contacted the game's music producers, who explained that 99% of the lyrics in the game are not in any language at all and don't mean anything. Instead, the lyrics are computer-generated and adjusted to resemble ancient languages. Intrigued to learn more, they went on to analyze other tracks and said that sometimes the lyrics resemble Latin, but they are not Latin. The goal was to simulate ancient language songs to enhance the dramatic feel of the player's experience. So, those are all the Elden Ring lore secrets that we've seen. If there's any that you've noticed, put it in the comments below to let us know what we've missed.